Welcome to the Philly Special. A bunch of guys who just like to talk about Philadelphia sports. Brought to you today by Blockbuster. Make it a Blockbuster night. Today's segment, we are going to be diving into the Philadelphia Eagles and the NFC East. My name is Ben Lawson, and I'll be co-hosting today with Kyle Walney, as well as a special appearance by our producer, Jason Hernandez. Our statistician today will be Joel Robeson. All right, let's get started, boys. Philadelphia Eagles. Not a great start to the season, I'll be honest.
Yeah, it definitely has not been how they planned. Losing to Ryan Fitzmagic, that just adds on.
What a magical season for him.
On the return of Deshaun Jackson, you got a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick who goes out and lights you up. I mean, they won the Super Bowl last year, but, this is probably about the worst start that you could have really imagined. Probably should have lost that game against the Falcons. Not sure how they escaped with that one. It ends up just looking like a win, but honestly, you can't avoid the problems that they have. You can't just look at the win because a lot of the problems that they have, those definitely showed up against Tampa Bay.
Now, before we dive into the whole Carson Wentz situation and whether or not Nick Foles is the reason they are not winning these games, we'll get into that later. Obviously, they're 1-1 after 2 weeks. Carson Wentz will be coming back, and that's just not the way they wanted to start the season, especially with hopes of obviously returning back to the Super Bowl. The expectations are high this year. I mean, when you get a team that's producing at an elite level, you expect them to keep producing. But, I mean, if you look at some of their stats from the first 2 games this year, they are below league average in many, many offensive categories. Their yards per drive are negative 1.54, below the league average. Their offense has not been clicking the way it was, especially in the postseason last year with some of the numbers they put up. And, I mean, hopefully – we'll get back to Carson Wentz later, but hopefully maybe his return can spark something with that Eagles offense.
Yeah, and they're going to have to start finding something offensively. And, I'm not really surprised too much with the fact that, they lost Frank Reich, who was a fantastic offensive coordinator last year. So, maybe a couple bumps along the way with the offense, bringing in Mike Groh this year. Maybe a little bit of an adjustment period. But at the same time, if you really look at it, a lot of the play calling is being done by Doug Peterson. So, I mean, you got an offensive coordinator, but at the same time, everything's going through the headset of Doug Peterson. And honestly, a lot of the struggles that we're seeing this year, uncharacteristic, and you can put a little bit of that on the offensive coordinator in the turnover there. But at the same time, you can't really hold on to that as a reason. It's very possible that Frank Reich had a good scheme put together because he saw almost a seamless transition last year from Carson Wentz after the injury to Nick Foles. Pretty seamless transition. Now this year, same players, basically struggling big time. Maybe it was just a blip in the career of Nick Foles, but I don't know. They're going to have to start finding something here. They're going to have to hope that what they get in the offense from Carson Wentz definitely solves the problems because they're going to have to look a little bit better offensively if they're going to look to repeat.
Now, even after a lackluster start to the season, really, they're being outranked and outmatched in the first 2 games by total yards and passing yards. They have 644 yards of offense in the first 2 games as opposed to 735 given up by to their opponents, and only 440 passing yards as compared to 618 passing yards to their opponents. Obviously, Ryan Fitzpatrick just had no mercy and had a nice day against the Eagles. Even rushing yards, a slim advantage. That 204 rushing yards, Ajayi's given them some decent production. They've only given up 117 rushing yards, so that's been pretty solid. The receiving core it's nothing to be ashamed of. Nelson Aguilar, a solid receiver. Zach Ertz, a great tight end. Alshon Jeffrey, he's a little older, maybe a little past his prime, but still a great target there. So it's hard to say where you think the kink in the armor is in this offense, and it's hard to not look at the replacement quarterback in Nick Foles and maybe wonder why, if it's him, he's to blame, or if Carson Wentz can return and maybe be the savior and the spark this offense needs to really get going. Luckily, the bad start hasn't cost them too much. They're in a pretty weak NFC East. It looks like they're still tied for first at 1-1. No one's undefeated in the NFC East, so they've got nothing really to worry about there. Every team's still at ground zero, fighting for any sort of NFC East title or playoff appearance.
Right. I definitely think that the fact that they're in that weak division that is the NFC East definitely gives them an advantage. They got a little bit of time here that they can, mess around and figure things out, and it really won't hurt them too much. They'll be able to win their division probably without any problem. I kind of liken it to the American League Central and the Cleveland Indians. Playing in a terrible division, what you do is you struggle and you find your way through those struggles, and as long as you've got it figured out by the end of the year, as long as you're getting hot towards, once you get to weeks 15, 16, and 17, then really no issues. And whatever happened in these first couple weeks of the season is totally irrelevant. But that doesn't mean that you can't point to certain things right now and say that changes definitely need to be made. And they, frankly, they just need to be better, especially offensively. Defensively, this team has been pretty good. Pretty much where you expect them to be. Ninth in defensive value above average, or defensive value over average. That's about where you expect them to be. A little surprising that you got teams like Cleveland and Baltimore ahead of them, but this early in the season, that's partially a product of schedule. Certain teams have played definitely harder opponents, and some on the road, some at home. But that's about where you expect them to be. Run defense really good. Second right now in the league, which is fantastic. You got to stop the run before you can stop the pass. And then they're 10th in the league in defending the pass. So, defense really has been, holding up its end of the bargain. But again, it comes down to that offense and getting used to the new offensive coordinator and the new scheme. And they're going to have to get a little bit better there. They're going to have to, they don't have to hurry, but, they can't wait too long.
Now, let's transition here. We've already mentioned them a few times. We got Carson Wentz supposed to be available in Week 3 here. Now, Nick Foles, his QBR for the first 2 games has been a terrible 52.5. Now, that is he's sitting there in 15th in the league, right in the middle. I mean, I guess it's not terrible, but there's definitely quarterbacks been playing worse. But, I mean, for a quarterback that played in the Super Bowl last year, you would think maybe you'd expect a little more production out of him, but I mean that's okay. I mean they're 1-1. They won the game that, like you said, maybe they shouldn't have, and then they lost to as of right now, a hot Tampa Bay team after 2 games. Kind of a surprise there. What do you think, Carson Wentz? What kind of impact do you think he'll have on this team? Do you think it'll be immediate? I mean, obviously Carson Wentz was in contention for the MVP last year before his injury. Many people thought he might have walked away with it. But is he going to be able to, come in and be this savior and the spark that they need? A Week 3 matchup against the Colts here. Not a whole big test against the Titans, but, a pretty good Vikings team will be competing against the Eagles in Week 5 there, which is maybe something to look at as maybe their next big test. But what kind of immediate impact do you think Carson Wentz can make on this offense? And do you think he offers enough to really jumpstart them and get them back to where they want to be at the top level of the NFL?
Well, a little bit unconventional here is I think that really the big impact that the return of Carson Wentz has is I think it's going to open up the run game actually a little bit more, because I don't think teams really have been respecting Nick Foles as a quarterback. They haven't been respecting his, downfield passing ability. So what you've seen is Philadelphia has, struggled a little bit more than they're used to running the ball, because, you got defenses are putting 7-8 guys in the box and they're daring Nick Foles to beat them with his arm, and as great as he was in the playoffs last year, I mean, water finds its level, and Nick Foles is going to, kind of regress to the mean a little bit. And, they're 13th in the league in rushing right now, which, isn't the end of the world. But at the same time, I think what you're going to see is teams are going to respect Carson Wentz's arm a little bit better than, a little bit more than they've been to Nick Foles. And I think what you're going to do is you're going to see more running lanes. Running game's going to get better. Pretty good offensive line. And then that's just going to open up the passing game even more for Carson Wentz. So I think that immediately inserting him into the starting lineup, the guys that they're putting out there for that game coming up this weekend, Carson Wentz returning, I think immediately that just opens up the offense in general by first opening up the running game a little bit, and then that's just going to turn into great things for the passing game. So I think that just, the threat of the deep ball, the threat of the passing game definitely adds a lot to the offense.
I agree, and the Eagles have a pretty solid running back core. They have Ajayi, obviously, as a starter. They picked up Corey Clement in the offseason last year before winning the Super Bowl, and he even contributed, of course, from Wisconsin there as college. Even caught a touchdown pass in the Super Bowl, if you remember. And they can expect to get some numbers out of him. They have a veteran running back in Darren Sproles, who's, 35 now, I think.
He's old.
Definitely an oldie. But, I mean, he can give them that veteran leadership. And they have a pretty solid run core. And I definitely think I think that maybe teams have not been respecting Foles like you suggest. And I think that really will open up their offense a lot with Wentz coming back and the deep ball threat, like you mentioned, and that power he has to really just, switch the field real quick on you like that. Yeah.
I definitely think that's big. I mean, really, if you think about it, in terms of, losses on offense, other than Frank Reich going to the Indianapolis Colts as the offensive coordinator, they didn't lose too much. I mean, they lost LeGarrette Blount, but, I think that you can replace his carries. I don't think that, he offered anything that's, irreplaceable, him moving on to Detroit, playing for the Lions now. But I think that, you can replace his production. His production wasn't anything unbelievably high either. Worst comes to worst, you can pick up a similar kind of running back at the trade deadline if they really felt it was necessary. But I really don't think that there's too much on offense that they have to replace from last year. I think it's just a matter of kind of settling down, taking a little bit of time here and eventually getting back to what they were last year. And if they were in a better division, then maybe that would be a problem. If they were, take the Lions out of the NFC North and replace them with Philadelphia, then maybe it's a little bit more urgent. There's a little bit more pressure because you got teams like the Vikings and the Packers, which would be jumping all over them right now. But they're lucky enough that they're competing against the mess in Dallas under Jerry Jones, and they're competing with the corpse of Eli Manning. It's just there's really not a whole lot. Alex Smith hasn't really. He's been pretty good, but he's not a guy that's really going to threaten you. Adrian Peterson, 45 years old now, still playing. I mean, there's not a whole lot that they have to worry about, and I think that definitely helps them with developing that offense and, just getting back to where they were last year. And if they can do that, then, they're right back where they were last year, right back where they need to be. So
and I think
got to preach patience.
That definitely takes a lot of pressure off Wentz, especially knowing that they kind of have this cushion to fall back on. They definitely, I mean, there's nowhere to go for them but up. Like the NFC East, like we've mentioned several times, right? It's not going to be a big threat to them. I mean, speaking of the NFC East, we can kind of transition here maybe into a more broader scheme of the NFL and maybe more specifically just the NFC in general here. So the East is not shouldn't pose a huge threat to the Eagles, but maybe looking at the rest of the NFC, you've already mentioned some players that don't pose a threat, but what do you think are some teams that really the Eagles need to keep an eye on? I know one immediately I look at is the Rams, who have been playing some real solid football already this year. And, I mean, you can never count out Aaron Rodgers, as we've seen come back from literally getting killed off the field, comes back, and brings them back to a heroic win. So, I mean, who do you think? I mean, do you think maybe the Buccaneers can keep Fitzpatrick hot, or do you think he's going to cool down? Do you think maybe the Rams or the Falcons. Who are you feeling here, Kyle?
So, Tampa Bay, I don't trust them. I think that this is just I think it's a real cute story. I think it's great, fantastic. Glad the people in Tampa Bay are enjoying a little bit of good football right now. I mean, Lord knows they need it.
They deserve it, honestly.
Florida State's terrible. Florida's terrible. They don't have anything down there. I mean, they got Willie Taggart and Charlie Strong cast-offs from the schools they were at prior. So, I mean, college football down there, terrible. Dolphins, terrible. Tannehill, terrible. I guess it's nice that they've got a team right now in Tampa Bay. Jacksonville's pretty good, but I don't like Blake Bortles. But, from the NFC, Tampa Bay, nice story, but no, I don't want it.
What do you have against Blake Bortles?
What do I have against Blake Bortles? I got, that's a whole different story. I'm not even going to go there with Blake Bortles. But, Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think he's a better option than Jameis Winston. I think it's a nice story. I don't think that they're going to do a whole lot. They don't pose a challenge to him. Obviously, you go to the LA Rams. I think that that's the easy pick. I'm so tempted to pick Chicago, to go with Chicago with that Khalil Mack addition. I think that defense and that front seven, absolutely fantastic. And it's starting to show up in the numbers. I mean, that pass defense rank for Chicago, 5th in the league right now in terms of efficiency. I mean, that's unbelievable, and I think that a big part of that is because of the pass rush they're getting. Defensive or rushing 8th. So I think that Chicago's really good.
Do you think Chicago might be able to run away with the NFC North over a team like the Packers or the Vikings? Or do you think maybe the potential wild card spot? Or
I think that Chicago's got to look at a wild card spot. I think that that's really their only option. With that defense, I'm so tempted to go with Chicago, but at the same time, I haven't liked Trubisky since his days at North Carolina. So I don't think I can go with them. But honestly, out of the NFC North, Aaron Rodgers is a bad man, but I just don't think he's got the cast around him on defense. Guys like Jake Ryan out for the year. Don't trust them. So I think that I would have to go with Minnesota. I think that the Rams have the most star power in the NFC, but I think that Minnesota's got the best roster. Top to bottom. They don't have a whole lot of A-plus guys, but they also don't have any C guys. That's a team full of B guys and A guys. It's just a loaded, deep roster. There's really, through 16-game schedule, there's a lot of attrition. There's a lot of injuries, things like that, and I don't think there's anyone in the league that can survive it better than Minnesota. Bringing in Kirk Cousins, they finally got, a real quarterback, a decent quarterback here. I think that he can be a game manager. That defense that they've got in Minnesota, absolutely unbelievable. Overall defensive efficiency, 2nd in the league right now. Only, 2nd to the Rams. But, I just trust Kirk Cousins and that offense a little bit more than I trust Jared Goff at this moment in time. That could change. But as of right now, I just think that defense in Minnesota, absolutely incredible. So, I got to take Minnesota. It's a veteran team.
Absolutely. I mean, I can definitely get behind you. Switching now, maybe real quick here before we leave the viewers here, or the listeners, I should say. We're gonna head to maybe it's early, very very early in the season. I know, only heading into week 3 here, but I kind of want to look maybe at some Super Bowl predictions. We talked a lot about the NFC. Maybe just a quick glance at the AFC. I mean, obviously the Jaguars, I think they're the real deal. Tyreek Hill's been putting up crazy numbers for the Chiefs. Their offense has been looking pretty nice so far. I mean, the Dolphins are leading the AFC East, but that's both know that's not gonna stay. Who do you think? I mean, do you think maybe a surpriser out of the AFC North? Maybe the Steelers don't make it out. Maybe a team like the Bengals, who are actually looking somewhat decent right now. Andy Dalton doesn't look like a trash quarterback anymore. He looks like he actually could be somewhat decent. But maybe, knowing him, it's probably just a strike of luck. Joe Mixon already been hurt. He's already going to be out for week 3. So I wonder if the Bengals can maybe keep up their production. But yeah, real quick before we wrap things up, maybe just a quick Super Bowl matchup potential down the road we can look at.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, with Pittsburgh in that division, I mean, that division's a mess right now. Pittsburgh is a mess right now. You mentioned Cincinnati, but I'm telling you right now, even with all this turmoil that's going on in Pittsburgh right now, I think Cincinnati's going to have a chance at them, but they're going to, blow it, finish 9-7, and Marvin Lewis is going to get a 10-year extension. I mean,
Classic Cincinnati.
that is classic Cincinnati. So I just, I still see Pittsburgh coming out of their division, but at the same time, I just don't think that they have a chance. Honestly, the team that I'm going with out of the AFC, and this is partially due to my bias, I'm an offensive guy. Kansas City. I love Kansas City.
I was gonna say the same thing, I swear.
Yeah, I love that offense in Kansas City. I loved Patrick Mahomes since his days at Texas Tech. When Kansas City traded up in the first round to go and get him, I thought it was an absolutely fantastic move. He was my favorite quarterback out of that draft class. I would have to go Kansas City. If you look around the rest of the AFC, I mean, there's not a whole lot to be worried about. You got New England, who's always, perennially pretty good, but I just don't see it from them this year. Eventually, there has to be a year where New England just doesn't have the same success that we're accustomed to seeing.
It's hard to imagine, but it eventually is going to have to happen.
Eventually, in my lifetime, we're going to see a New England Patriots team that's just not any good, and that blows my mind.
Every era has to come to an end.
Yeah, so eventually New England's not going to do it. I think it's going to be this year. I think this is the year that they don't make it out of the AFC. Kansas City is going to be my team, and I know Andy Reid teams, especially when he had Alex Smith there, start hot, fizzle out. I understand that that's the thing here, and they're starting hot again, but I'm buying in this time because it's Patrick Mahomes and it's not Alex Smith. I trust Patrick Mahomes. He's got that crazy arm, passing offense efficiency right now, first in the league. Rushing offense 9th. I think that this is just an explosive offense. I love explosive offense, and explosion. That explosiveness on offense is really it's such a great predictor of how successful a team's going to be. So I'm going Kansas City out of the AFC, out of the NFC. I think I got to go with as much as I like the Eagles' chances, I think I got to go with the Rams or Minnesota, one of those two teams because of those great defenses, and Philly's got to get it figured out here on offense, but I just don't think they're going to do it in time.
I like it. I really like that Chiefs pick. I can get behind you there for sure. But yeah, that's just a quick little Super Bowl prediction here, Week 3 of the NFL. Obviously, a lot of football left to go. Maybe we're completely wrong. Who knows? It's kind of surprising to see us not expecting the Patriots to go all the way. I mean, interesting to see the talk really not been a whole lot on Philadelphia, New England. But maybe Tom Brady's had his time, and maybe it's time for these the new boys to come and take over. That's all the time we have for today, though. We thank you all for listening again to another Philly Special podcast here, and we will catch you on the next one.